Imagine walking into a castle where time has stopped. Where every shadow seems to breathe. And every whisper calls your name. What if the reflection in the mirror smiled back? But it was not you anymore. This is the haunting mystery of Whispers of the Old Castle. Once you step inside, there is no turning back. Will you dare to find out what happened to Sasi, before the whisper finds you? The ancient castle stood tall on the hill. A cold wind drifted through the cracked stone walls. The sound of an owl echoed in the darkness. Thick clouds hung low, almost touching the gray stone roof. The air smelled of damp dust and old wood. It felt as if time had stopped inside this place. A young woman named Sasi stepped into the grand hall. The flickering torchlight cast trembling shadows across the walls. Each step she took echoed in the heavy silence. The wooden floor creaked softly beneath her feet. A door somewhere far away groaned open as if pushed by unseen hands. Sasi's heart pounded. She froze in place, her eyes fixed on the old stone staircase leading upward. A torn curtain swayed even though there was no wind. A faint whisper floated down from above, as if someone was there. Sasi stood still at the foot of the staircase, her breath shallow and uneven. The faint whisper continued, curling through the air like smoke, almost forming words she could not quite understand. Her fingers trembled as she gripped the edge of her shawl tighter around her shoulders. The torchlight behind her flickered again, casting moving shadows that seemed to dance across the walls. Each shadow twisted and stretched into strange shapes, like the silhouettes of people frozen in mid-motion. She took one hesitant step onto the first stone stair. The sound of her shoe against the rough surface echoed louder than it should have, bouncing through the hollow hall. Somewhere above, a faint thud answered her movement. Her pulse quickened. It felt like something, or someone, was aware of her presence. The whisper returned, clearer this time. It was not a voice she recognized, yet it sounded close, almost beside her ear. Her name slipped through the silence, softly, slowly. Sasi. Her breath caught. She turned sharply, but there was nothing, only the empty corridor behind her, and the cold air brushing against her skin. The torch nearest to her went out without warning, plunging half the hall into darkness. She swallowed hard and looked up the staircase again. Step by step, she climbed higher, her heartbeat steady but loud in her ears. The smell of old stone mixed with something new, something metallic, faint but sharp. It reminded her of rust. Or blood. The air grew heavier as she reached the landing above. There was a long hallway ahead, lined with faded portraits. The faces in the paintings were almost gone, erased by time, but their eyes, those dark, hollow eyes, seemed to follow her. The whisper came again, this time from the end of the hall. It sounded urgent now, almost pleading. She moved toward it, one careful step at a time. The wooden floorboards moaned beneath her weight. To her right, a window shattered suddenly, glass scattering across the floor. The cold wind rushed in, carrying the scent of rain. Her heart raced faster, but curiosity held her stronger than fear. At the end of the hall stood a heavy wooden door, carved with strange symbols. The carvings looked ancient, maybe even older than the castle itself. Sasi raised her hand to touch one of the symbols, and the moment her fingers brushed the wood, the whisper stopped. The silence that followed was thick, pressing against her ears. She could hear only her breathing and the faint rumble of thunder outside. Then, with a slow creak, the door opened on its own. A sliver of darkness waited beyond, too deep to see into. She hesitated, then stepped through. Inside was a small chamber lit by a single candle on a stone pedestal. The flame burned weakly, its light revealing more carvings along the walls. They formed circles and lines, all connected in a pattern that made no sense to her. In the corner of the room stood a mirror, tall, cracked, and covered in dust. Her reflection looked strange in it, distorted by the broken glass. She wiped a hand across the surface to see more clearly. But the reflection did not move with her. Her body froze. The reflection stood still, staring back at her with eyes that were slightly wrong, too dark, too deep. Then, slowly, it began to smile. Her own lips remained still, but the reflection's grin widened unnaturally, stretching across its face. Sasi stumbled back, her heel striking the stone pedestal. The candle toppled and rolled across the floor, its flame flickering dangerously. The air grew colder, thick with the scent of smoke and decay. From the mirror, the reflection's hand began to move, pressing outward against the glass. The surface rippled like water. Her breath hitched as she watched a faint shape push through the mirror's frame. A hand, pale and long-fingered, emerged from the shimmering surface. It reached for her, dripping with something dark that stained the floor. Sasi screamed and turned to run, but the door behind her slammed shut with a violent crack. The sound echoed through the chamber like thunder. She pounded on the wood, shouting for help, but no sound came back, only the whisper, now twisted and cold, filling the air again. The mirror pulsed like a living thing, and the figure within it stepped closer, 1 foot sliding through the surface. It wore her face, her clothes, but its eyes were hollow, and its mouth moved in silence. She backed away until her spine hit the wall. Her hands scraped against the carvings, and suddenly she felt something warm beneath her fingers, like a heartbeat in the stone. The symbols glowed faintly, lines of red light spreading across the wall. The ground beneath her feet began to tremble. A deep sound rose from somewhere below the castle, like a door opening in the earth. The reflection, no, the other version of her, smiled again and tilted its head. Then it spoke, finally, in a voice that was hers but not hers. You came back. The candlelight flickered violently, and the wind howled through the shattered window. The carvings pulsed brighter, lighting the room in blood-red color. The air shimmered with heat and cold all at once, pressing against her chest until she could barely breathe. She fell to her knees, covering her ears, but the whispering multiplied, now hundreds of voices overlapping. They spoke her name again and again, chanting it, dragging it through the air like a curse. Her tears fell freely, but when they touched the glowing floor, they hissed and vanished. She forced herself to stand, shaking, and turned back toward the mirror. The figure inside had stepped completely out now. It stood in front of her, inches away, breathing softly. Sasi could smell the damp stone on its skin, could see the faint shimmer of her own necklace around its neck. The creature reached up and placed 1 cold finger on her forehead. For a moment, everything went still. Her thoughts blurred, her vision swam. The whispers faded to a distant hum. Then the figure leaned closer, its lips brushing her ear. It whispered something she could not understand, something ancient, filled with sorrow and command. Her knees gave out, and the last thing she saw before the darkness closed in was the mirror behind the creature. And in that mirror, her body still stood, watching, unmoving, trapped on the other side. The wind outside howled louder. The candle died. The door creaked open slowly, as if inviting someone else to enter. And from deep within the castle, the whisper began again, soft, cold, endless. The silence that followed was deep and endless. The storm outside had passed, leaving only the soft patter of rain on the broken windows. A faint light of dawn crept through the cracks in the stone walls, touching the chamber with a ghostly glow. The mirror stood still now, no longer rippling, its surface dull and lifeless. Only one reflection remained, Sasi's face, calm, serene, yet hollow. She blinked slowly, her movements steady but unnatural. There was no fear left in her eyes. Only quiet acceptance. The carvings on the walls had turned black, the glow gone, the warmth vanished. The air carried the scent of ash and old rain. Somewhere below, a door groaned open once more, but this time there was no whisper, only silence. Sasi walked to the window and looked out over the mist-covered hills. The world beyond seemed peaceful, untouched by what had happened inside the castle. Her hand pressed against the cold stone sill, and for a moment, she looked almost human again. Then, faintly, her lips curled into that same slow, unnatural smile. Outside, a traveler on the nearby road stopped and glanced toward the castle. He thought he saw someone standing in the window, just for a moment. A woman in white, watching. When he blinked, she was gone. The wind rose once more, circling the old castle walls. It carried a soft sound, like a whisper too faint to catch. Inside, the mirror gleamed for a brief second, reflecting not the room, but a dark forest under moonlight. Then it dimmed again, waiting. And as the first ray of sunlight touched the castle's highest tower, the whispers of the old castle faded into the wind. Not gone, only resting. Until someone else came seeking the truth that should have stayed forgotten.